Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review, and today we're looking at the Islander Port Jefferson on loan to me from Paul Whaley. Thank you, Paul, for loaning this watch to me. It is a beautiful watch. He also sent over a couple of straps for me to try, and I tried one of them, which is the FKM strap, which I absolutely love those. And so I'm going to have some great photos of this watch in a bunch of different situations. And we're going to go through the 5 things we typically go through, which are size, fitment, finish, accuracy, and then legibility and loom, with some concluding thoughts at the end. But also keep in mind, this is not a new watch to me, so I'm not going to give it a score because it comes to me after having been worn, and so that I can't use that variable against the watch itself. So let's get started with talking about the size. This watch has a 40 millimeter case diameter. It is also 13.2 millimeters off the wrist. Now on the chunky scale, this would be normally a chunkier watch. May not be such a huge fan of it, but remember, this is also a GMT movement, so you're going to have 4 hands stacked in there. This is also a skin diver, and skin divers, or dive watches in general, just are thicker because of the water resistance that they need. So the chunky factor on this is acceptable. It's normal. I actually like the proportions of this watch, and I prefer actually to have a 40 millimeter case rather than a smaller than 40 millimeter case. And to me, it all kind of fits together really well. What also I like about this watch is the size of the crown. The crown has a coin edge bezel texture to it, and so to me that is just a great grippy surface. The crown is the right size, it's easy to manipulate, and it also matches up with the coin edge surface on the bezel. So aesthetically, I like the look of both of those, and it's very functional. Now, what about the fitment of this watch? Now, the FKM strap, I love the FKM strap. As a matter of fact, I think I prefer the FKM strap to the Beads of Rice bracelet, which comes with the watch. But the Beads of Rice bracelet has one issue that I don't like about it, and that's the clasp. The clasp seems out of place. When you look at the clasp, it has kind of a dull finish all the way around it. You have above it and below it, you have beads of rice that are polished. You have the outer part of the link that is brushed. And then there's just nothing on the clasp. It seems like it's missing something, that maybe they should have polished, put some chamfered edges on the edge of the clasp, I don't know, or put maybe a polished stripe down the middle. That would add a lot of scratchable surface maybe for it. I'm just not real sure about it, but it just doesn't seem like it's totally matching up with the rest of the bracelet. Now, one cool thing about the bracelet is that it has negative beads of rice end links to it, which means that it drapes over the wrist of smaller wristed people much more easily than you would have in most other designs, actually. And with the beads of rice, you get a very comfortable fit, a very form-fitting fit, and I think it's just a great comfortable bracelet to wear. I've never had a beads of rice bracelet before, and this one really is nice to wear. Now, adjusting this size, and I didn't have to adjust this size. Paul and I have similar sized wrists. I just had to adjust the micro adjust on the clasp, and it fits pretty good. It's a little snug, but it's not bad. One more thing on the clasp that I'm not really a fan of, and the fact that it has micro adjusts at $579 to me, Mark, I think you need to upgrade this to a adjustable on-the-fly clasp. I think a lot of other companies can do this at a much lower price, even though it's a GMT. I get that, but I really think this clasp should get a fully adjustable, on-the-fly adjustable clasp. Did I just mention fully adjustable, on the adjustable clasp? You get the idea. Now, the finish of this watch, I absolutely love the finish of this watch. Aside from the clasp, the rest of this is fantastic. You've got a little polish, you've got a little brush on here. It has that tool look. It also has some of that refined look. The beads of rice are all polished. The outside portion of the links are all brushed. So really, it does a great job of just kind of getting you into both worlds. You can wear this watch for a lot of different occasions. I think for me, I would rather not have the beads of rice bracelet. I'm leaning more towards that FKM strap because for me, it looks a little bit more of like a sporty looking watch. And so dressing it up just to me is like, I don't think I want to do that. Plus, I think I get more use out of it when I wear an FKM strap or maybe a bracelet with less polish to it. A little bit of polish is good, but I think it might have a little too much with all of those beads of rice being polished. Now, if we move from the outside looking in, the dial itself is fantastic. I love the blue color of this dial. The dial has a little bit of a fume tone to it. On the edges, it gets a little bit darker where it gets out by the hour markers, and towards the center, it's a little bit brighter of a blue. Also, you have these contrasting colors between orange and blue, which on the color wheel, they are the opposites, which makes them contrast very well. And so having the GMT hand, the arrowhead on the hand being orange is outstanding. I love that. You also have little orange markers on here, which I think are great. They're very subtle, very small, nothing really bright. The orange itself is not a real bright orange. Even the blue itself is a little bit kind of a subdued blue, which I really like. If we take a look at the hour markers, you're going to notice there's a subtle size difference between the 12, 3, and the 9 markers. They're a little bit longer than the rest. I didn't realize this until I was doing some magnifying lens work because I was curious about something else. And then I realized, hey, wait a minute, that second hand, that little rectangular lollipop at the end is overlapping on the 3. And I was like, well, wait a minute, it doesn't look like it overlaps on the 4 or the 5. I thought it was off. And then I come to realize that the 12, 3, and the 9 are actually slightly larger than the other hour markers. So this is really kind of I don't quite get why you wouldn't go a little bit further with the size of the 12, 3, and the 9. I think it would be very helpful, especially for organization when you're looking at your watch. I love that kind of quadrant look feel that you get. It really helps determine where things are at very quickly. I do like the bezel. The bezel looks great. It's a very kind of a thin width to it, so it's not really overpowering on the watch. It's a skin diver watch. It's not a dive watch, so really the bezel just adds another aesthetic of kind of water resistance rating, that whole dive feel to it, but it doesn't overpower the dial at all. Now the bezel action is kind of odd, and again, this is a used watch, or this is a watch on loan to me, so I'm not really going to be dinging this, but when you start turning the bezel on this, and I'll do this in front of the microphone, you can hear, and then it gets really more difficult at the 5 o'clock. So from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock as it goes around counterclockwise, it turns relatively easily, almost too easy, but then when you get from the 5 o'clock position to the 11 o'clock position, it gets a little bit more difficult to turn. So that might be just a one-off issue with the construction or the assembly of this watch. I don't know what to think of that, but it's just something I wanted to make sure I mentioned. The handset on this watch is not my favorite handset. I really like the GMT hand, so put that aside for just a second. And if we look at the hour hand and the minute hand, they're just too similar in shape. And here's where that shape difference comes into play. Because if the hour hand is slightly wider than the minute hand, and the hour hand lines up with any of the hour markers, which it lines up perfectly with them, they don't look like the hour marker and the hour hand don't look like the minute hand. So for me, that's just one of those things where I think the hour hand should be just a little bit more differentiated from the minute hand. That's just kind of my theme for all of my analog watches. I want to know that the hour hand is different. Also, the finish of this watch, it has a sapphire crystal. The bezel is awesome. I just love the overall construction of this watch. It has that tool look to it. I think this would be a great work watch, aside from the fact that you don't want to use this for any type of impact type labor work. But if it's just, maybe light machine work or office work or just wandering around the woods, I think this watch is a great work watch for that. Accuracy of the watch is well within spec. It's a Miyota 9000 series movement. It's for the GMT movement. And I just love this movement. Miyota, the 9000 series is one of my favorite high beat movements. It's been so reliable. I've never had an issue with the Miyota movement before. I have had an issue with the Sellita movement, a high beat SW200. And I've not had anything with the NH series of Seiko movements. So that's kind of that's a 21K movement. This is a 28K movement. So those are kind of two different categories. I've always had good luck with the Miyota movements. Now, what about the legibility of this watch? We've talked a little bit about this, but I just want to remind you that the darkness of this dial on the edges really helps with legibility in contrast with the hour markers. And the hour markers are white. They're not that Fotina look, which I'm not a fan of Fotina. So that contrast between the hour markers and the dial itself is great. I can really tell what the time is. Although when the hour hand is on the exact hour marker, it gets a little bit more difficult to tell which hand is the hour hand and which hand is the minute hand. So legibility-wise, I think this watch does a good job with that. Now, what about the loom of this watch? The loom is okay. This is another area I think at $579, the loom really needs to be improved on this watch. Now, surprisingly, when you look at the loom shot here, the hands and the hour markers, they all fade at the same rate, basically, along with the bezel. Bezel might be just a little bit more tired towards the end. but the GMT hand stands out from the rest. So whatever they put on the GMT hand, put it on the other hands and put it on the hour markers, because that would be awesome. I think it would be a great buy if you improved the loom on this watch and also improved the clasp to an on-the-fly adjustable clasp. Water resistance is 150 meters, so you can use this at will under any water circumstance that you have. So the positives of this watch is just a beautiful design. I love the color scheme on this watch. The blue and the orange, they really go together well. Minimal text on the watch. The high beat movement really sets this off as just kind of a more refined sport watch, a skin diver watch. You also have, I think, great hour markers, although I think the 12, 3, and 9 should be a little bit more distinguished from the rest, and the hour hand should be more distinguished from the minute hand. The two big issues that I have with this is the price reflecting the kind of loom that's on here and the price reflecting the type of clasp that's on this bracelet. Now, for the star of the show, I want to show you one cool thing about this watch that I'm not sure, I'm guessing Mark knows this because he's a mechanical engineer by trade, but if you put a magnifying lens up to where the second hand is and slow down the video, you can see the second hand hits all of those microsecond marks in between the 5-second intervals. And so I've got this video here, take a look at this, and you can see that second hand jumping. It's a 28K movement, which means there's going to be 40 ticks between those 5 seconds, which is 8 seconds or 8 ticks per second. And it does a great job. I think this is one of the most cool features about this watch. You'll see a lot of watches have these microsecond marks on there, and the second hand doesn't hit them because they're not designed to do that. Maybe it's a 21K movement, and they've got some weird interval in there, you know, every 1/5 of a second or every 1/10 of a second or whatever it is. But this is actually lined up. It's a cool feature. This is not something I've heard anybody else talk about, so I'm just going to mention this to you. I think this is actually one of the things that bumps things up a little bit as far as like, that's a cool feature for this watch, and maybe that $579 engineering-wise might be more worth it. So would I recommend this watch? Absolutely, I'd recommend this watch. Paul, thank you for loaning this watch to me. It is a great watch. I highly recommend this. Also, check out Paul's channel at Paul Whaley on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description for his channel. He does a great job over there. He does more than just watches. He does some other cool stuff as well. If you're interested in that, check him out. Also, check out my webpage, realidealgear.com, for some used or reviewed watches, knives, flashlights, those kind of things. I got to move some of that stuff out here. I can't have all the clutter at my house. I'll share it with you. So there you go. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear review. We'll catch you guys next time. For most jobs that don't involve a lot of hard, banging, hard banging? What's a hard bang? Paul and I have done a number of live streams together, and he sent this watch to me. I didn't even know he was going to send it to me. He just sent a text and said, "Hey, I got something on the way. Yeah. But I'm going to go down the route of just kind of things that I like about the watch, things I'm not too much fond of, or fond of. A fond? Is a fond something? A fond? A Fonda? Huh. Jane Fonda? Henry Fonda?